The morning light crept lazily over the horizon, casting a soft glow on my modest lawn. Dew glistened like scattered diamonds on each blade of grass, a delicate elegance that I cherished. This was my sanctuary, a humble patch of earth in an otherwise pristine neighborhood, governed by the ever-watchful eyes of the Homeowners Association, and more specifically, Karen. Karen, with her perfectly coiffed hair and perpetual aura of superiority, was the queen of conformity. Her lawn was a manicured masterpiece, a testament to the landscaping company she swore by. It was as if each blade was measured and trimmed with surgical precision. I appreciated her dedication, silently marveling at the parade of gardening trucks that parked in front of her house every week. But my lawn was a different story. It was an expression, a quiet rebellion against the cookie-cutter perfection she championed. The first time Karen commented on my lawn, it was a mere flicker of disdain in her eyes as she glanced sideways during our neighborhood block party. Her smile was too rehearsed, her compliment too sharp. But I heard it clearly, the underlying message that my yard was beneath the neighborhood standard. Unkempt, she'd probably label it. I watched her, assessing her with the same scrutiny she afforded my grass. Behind her facade of perfection was a meticulous planner, a seeker of flaws in others to fortify her own standing. It amused me, the effort she put into maintaining the illusion. Her petty actions began soon after that party. Notes appeared in my mailbox, thinly veiled suggestions to hire a professional. They bore her familiar handwriting, cursive loops that seemed to smirk from the paper. She never signed them, of course, but the scent of her perfume lingered on each one. It smelled of roses, with a hint of condescension. I imagined her dropping those notes, a smug satisfaction dancing in her eyes. I could feel the weight of her judgment during my morning walks, her gaze a tangible force that pressed down on me. But I met it with calm resolve, a quiet strength that was my own. My lawn was not a symbol of neglect, but of choice, a reminder that beauty lay in diversity, not uniform blades. It was almost comical how predictable her escalation became. She enlisted the HOA to send formal letters, official-looking with their letterheads and legalese. I chuckled at each one, filing them away in a drawer reserved for insignificant grievances. They were nothing more than paper soldiers in Karen's little war on imperfection. In my heart, I knew that a response was unnecessary. Her efforts were a reflection of her own insecurities, not mine. But I couldn't deny the seed of an idea that began to take root, growing with each new missive, a concept so beautifully ironic that I couldn't help but nurture it. Karen laughed at my lawn. I smiled inwardly, the irony not lost on me. Her laughter was the catalyst, the push needed to transform annoyance into something more profound. There was a gentle humor in the thought of turning the tables, of stepping into her meticulously crafted world and rearranging the pieces. The day I made the call, the sun was high, casting bold shadows that crisscrossed my lawn. I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. Change was in the air, a shift in the dance between Karen and me. I bought the landscaping company she used, not out of spite, but because there's poetry in unexpected reversals. The morning light threaded through the blinds, casting orderly lines across the kitchen floor. Orderly, unlike my thoughts, or my mailbox, which had become a reservoir for Karen's incessant stream of HOA correspondence. I took a sip of coffee, the bitterness grounding, while outside my window, the lawn stretched out like a chessboard. Karen knew the rules well, each subsection and clause a weapon in her arsenal. She wielded them with the precision of a maestro, orchestrating a symphony of citations that arrived with unsettling rhythm. A yellowed leaf on my driveway became an untidy appearance or so. And a bird bath, an unauthorized structure. Words so absurd they were almost poetic in their ridiculousness. I filed each notice in a growing stack, a testament to her fervor. Yet, I found a peculiar tranquility in this paper fortress. It was a reflection of her desperation, not mine. Each new directive was a note in our silent conversation. She was speaking loudly, but perhaps not wisely. The neighborhood grapevine, ever fertile, sprouted rumors like weeds after rain. Whispers emerged, casting me as the anarchist in our suburban Eden. Ironic, given my newfound role as the silent owner of the landscaping company that tended to her gloriously manicured lawn. A detail I wore like invisible armor, shielding me from her barbs. There was an art to playing the long game, and I was content to watch her play her hand. Her tactics were overt, all sharp angles and abrupt edges, while mine were the mellow murmurs of a babbling brook slowly altering the landscape. Karen's latest attempt was a meeting, an emergency session convened in her living room, a gathering of the faithful, muttering discontent and nodding in unison. I was absent, but my presence was palpable, a shadow cast long and deep. The irony was not lost on me. They plotted beneath her lavish chandelier, its crystal facets reflecting a light she couldn't see. My thoughts drifted to the company I'd acquired, a small empire of green thumbs and sunburned faces, each employee with an expertise Karen could only dream of. They labored under the sun, a quiet rebellion expressed through clippers and seed. They knew, in some unspoken way, whom they truly served. In the days that followed, my yard became an artist's canvas. Subtle shifts in foliage, a strategic placement of color. Changes that spoke volumes to those who listened, a silent symphony playing beneath Karen's nose. Her eyes, sharp and searching, missed the melody entirely. I savored the irony, the quiet power of my position, like a gardener tending to a secret garden, biding time until the blooms revealed themselves. Karen's laughter, once a grating note, had become a distant echo. She was an unwitting part of the landscape now. Her actions like ripples in a pond, spreading but ultimately fading. The universe has a penchant for balance. I found solace in that thought, watching as Karen spun her web, unaware of the spider watching from the shadows. The edges of the photograph fluttered between my fingers like the wings of a trapped moth. I examined the evidence. A picture-perfect lawn, an ocean of manicured green, framing Karen's immaculate house, the epitome of suburban perfection, her fortress of superiority. I had watched her parade that yard like it was the crown jewel of the neighborhood, her gaze always sharp and disapproving whenever it lingered on my own humble patch. The whispers she had sown about my untamed greenery had been as relentless as kudzu, spreading fast and suffocating. Her laughter, a knife disguised as mirth, had cut through the air with the precision of a surgeon. But now, the scales were about to tip. I could feel it in my bones, a quiet thrill that crackled in the air like distant thunder. I had done my research, collected my data. The contracts, the schedules, each decision she made about her precious lawn, all documented with the precision of an archivist. Knowledge was power, and I held it tightly, a leash on a beast ready to be unleashed. Purchasing the landscaping company had been a masterstroke. Subtle, like the shifting of tectonic plates before an earthquake, it was a quintessentially American move. If you can't join the club, buy the clubhouse. The irony was not lost on me, and I let it settle over me like a warm coat against the chill of her disdain. I waited, not with impatience, but with the anticipation of a hunter watching its prey. I watched as the crew, now under my command, arrived at Karen's house one bright morning, their tools gleaming in the sun. They moved methodically, blades slicing, edges trimmed with geometric precision. The lawn was transformed yet again into a verdant canvas. It was time. The subtlety of my counterstrike lay in its simplicity, a minor reshuffling of priorities, a gentle nudge here and there. Her appointments were rescheduled. The meticulous care she expected left wanting. The grass, Her symbol of triumph began to wither under the weight of neglect. The emerald sheen dulled, patches of brown slowly blotting her pride. Every morning I watched her from behind the curtain, her face a mask of disbelief, her fortress crumbling, brick by brick, under the invisible hand of my quiet rebellion. I could almost hear the ticking of her composure unraveling, the internal monologue of a woman scorned running frantically through her mind like a cornered fox. Her confrontation, when it came, was as predictable as rain in April. Her voice, usually so polished and controlled, cracked like thin ice. A single line escaped her lips, a plea coded in disdain, a demand wrapped in desperation. It hung in the air, heavy and brittle. I merely inclined my head, allowing a small, inscrutable smile to play on my lips. No words were necessary. The victory was mine, a silent triumph spoken through actions rather than words. I watched her retreat, her steps faltering under the weight of realization. The balance of power had shifted. The once unyielding hierarchy crumbled, leaving only the echoes of laughter that had once haunted my days. A quiet satisfaction settled over me, richer than any word could convey. In the game of lawns and pride, it was not the grass that mattered, but what lay beneath. The roots of power, once grasped, never easily relinquished. Grass blades glistened under the morning sun, droplets of dew forming tiny prisms of light. The neighborhood held its breath, each house lined up like soldiers in a parade, their manicured lawns saluting the dawn. Except mine. My lawn, a silent rebellion against uniformity, now luxuriated in a symphony of vibrant greens and tasteful ornamentals. It was a verdant canvas, painted with the strokes of my newfound authority. Karen had laughed at my lawn once. Her laughter had been sharp, a discordant note echoing through the neighborhood. But now, it was my turn to play the music. The very landscaping company she held in high regard, whose prowess she flaunted like a badge of superiority, was now under my control. I had subtly orchestrated a takeover, my quiet revenge hidden beneath the surface, like roots spreading underground. Neighbors began to notice. Some cast curious glances, others whispered in hushed tones. The Smiths, always so attentive to the latest gossip, observed from their porch, pretending to sip coffee while their eyes darted between my yard and Karen's. Change rustled through the community like a breeze stirring the leaves. Tension rippled outward, invisible, yet palpable. Karen's pristine garden, once the neighborhood's crown jewel, now looked strangely diminished next to my newly transformed plot. Her roses, perfect and predictable, seemed rigid in their regimented rows, while my wildflowers danced freely, a riot of colors and scents. The silence between us was a delicate thread, stretched taut by every sideways glance and unspoken word. She hadn't approached me since the change, hadn't dared to confront the shift in power dynamics that had unfolded in plain sight. But her presence lingered, a spectral figure watching from shadowed windows. I moved through my garden, fingers trailing through feathery ferns, feeling the earth's heartbeat beneath my feet. The landscaping crew arrived with precision, their movements a ballet of efficiency and expertise. I watched them work, a silent conductor to their orchestrated symphony of growth and renewal. Karen's husband, usually a specter on their immaculate lawn, had started nodding in my direction. Recognition? Respect? Perhaps a silent acknowledgement of the game I'd been playing. The neighborhood's hierarchy trembled on the edge of recalibration, a careful balancing act tipped by my strategic intervention. In the crisp afternoon light, the community gathered for one of its routine meetings. Karen was there, of course, her presence commanding, her eyes scanning the room with the intensity of a hawk. I sat quietly, my posture relaxed, the weight of my actions grounding me. The room buzzed with anticipation, an undercurrent of unrest weaving through the polite chatter. The meeting droned on, voices blending into a monotonous hum, until Karen's voice sliced through, addressing the state of the lawns with her usual flair. Eyes turned to me, expectation hanging in the air like fog. The moment stretched, a fragile bubble on the verge of bursting. I met her gaze, unflinching. The power dynamic had shifted, and we both knew it. Her laughter, once a weapon, now seemed hollow. Her words, usually sharp and pointed, faltered slightly, just enough for me to hear the tremor beneath the surface. With a subtle smile, I nodded, acknowledging the unspoken understanding between us. It was a simple gesture, yet potent in its suggestion. The room exhaled, tension dissipating into the mundane flow of neighborly exchanges. As I left the meeting, the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting golden light over the neighborhood. My garden, vibrant and untamed, whispered secrets to the wind. In its chaos, I found peace. In its growth, my quiet victory. Karen's reign over the neighborhood had shifted, the balance of power now resting in my hands, gently, like the petals of a flower unfurling in the dawn. The autumn air carried a crispness that hinted at change and possibility. Leaves whispered secrets in the gentle breeze, and I found myself listening closely, leaning into the subtle shift of the world around me. With each step towards the HOA office, I felt a rhythm and resolve in my stride, a quiet power fueled by knowledge and patience. Karen's laughter had echoed for too long, her sneers like weeds that refused to yield. Yet the day had come when the earth beneath her perfectly manicured grass would tremble with irony. I held in my hand not a weapon of noise, not a sword of anger, but a simple letter. Yet its weight was monumental. In the days following my acquisition of the landscaping company, I had delved into the finer threads of contracts and legalities, weaving my way through the intricacies of property deeds and bylaws. My steps were careful, deliberate. I sowed seeds that would grow unseen until they flourished into undeniable truths. Karen, of course, had remained oblivious. Her world spun in the orbit of familiarity and control. She saw her kingdom in rules and regulations, wielding authority with the precision of a gardener trimming a hedge. But she had never realized the roots beneath her feet, how they could shift and grow beyond her reign. The HOA meeting was a congregation of faces both familiar and forgettable, a tableau of suburban uniformity. Chairs scraped, papers rustled, and the mundane rituals unfolded with predictable regularity. As Karen presided, her voice was a melody of condescendence. Yet I noticed, for the first time, a crack in her composure, a slight unease shadowing her confidence. She sensed it, the change in the air, though she could not yet name it. I observed in silence, an audience to my own quiet symphony. Layers unfolded slowly, like petals unfurling to reveal the core. The letter, sealed with the insignia of legal authority, found its place before her. The room held its breath as she read, the silence deepening as words began to seep into understanding. Her eyes flickered, a moment of disbelief, a fracture in the facade. In the world she had crafted, such moments were rare, and therefore profound. It was a dance of realization and denial, the slow dawn of comprehension. I watched as she navigated the terrain of her own making, the landscape shifting beneath her. The ownership of her trusted landscaping service, now in my hands, was a bridge she never saw coming. Her fortress of authority trembled, not from aggression, but from the gentle erosion of certainty. The room resumed its rhythm, the conversation weaving around her quiet, stunned silence. I felt a serene detachment, a satisfaction not in her downfall, but in the justice of balance restored. My revenge was not about lawns or laughter, but about reclaiming my narrative. As I stepped into the cool embrace of the evening, the world felt different. Not because I had triumphed, but because I had learned to grow in the shadow of her shadow. I had discovered the power of quiet, of patience, and the art of letting the universe unfold. The night was calm, the stars mere pinpricks in a vast tapestry. I walked home feeling the earth beneath my feet, knowing that sometimes the most profound changes arise not from noise, but from silence. The morning sun was fierce, casting light across the lawns, green oceans of grass now whispering secrets to one another. The street was quiet, save for the familiar hum of sprinklers ticking in rhythmic approval. Victory, they seemed to chant, the kind of quiet that follows a storm when the world is left to pick up the pieces. Karen's reign had ended, her once commanding presence reduced to little more than the sound of her manicured nails clicking against her porch railing as she stared out at the community she no longer held in her grasp. The heart of the neighborhood thudded softly with a new rhythm. The landscaping company I now owned worked diligently, crafting each yard into a vivid tapestry, each more vibrant than the next. The irony was not lost on me. Underneath the layers of grass and soil lay the cobwebbed remnants of Karen's stranglehold, now a hollow echo of control. The neighborhood had started to breathe again. The air was lighter, the smiles of neighbors genuine instead of painted with fear. The exact opposite of what Karen had cultivated with her sharp eyes and sharper tongue. It was a new season on our street, and I stood in the center of it, quietly powerful, orchestrating change not with words, but with action. I watched as the crew moved efficiently, their vibrant vests dotting the landscape like a migration of tiny, industrious creatures. They reshaped the lawns and, in doing so, reshaped the community. Karen could only watch, her power clipped like the overgrown hedges now sculpted into harmonious forms. Karen's porch, once a stage from which she delivered her scathing critiques, was now a place of silent resignation. The irony was rich, like a fine wine aged in the cask of her own making. Her eyes followed the workers as they meticulously edged her lawn. She might have laughed at my expense before, but now her laughter was swallowed by the symphony of mowers and trimmers. I walked the length of the street, the ground firm and forgiving beneath my feet. Memories of her scornful laughter, once stinging like nettles, were now little more than a distant echo. The change in the community was palpable, an undercurrent of freedom that tingled in the air. We were no longer bound by her arbitrary rules, her judgments cast aside like fallen leaves. A neighbor passed me, nodding, their grin wide and full of the camaraderie we once thought lost. It was a nod of acknowledgement, of shared victory. The old HOA rules, puppeteered by Karen to her liking, were now being rewritten in a language of inclusivity and respect. The bylaws, once her scepter, now redefined by the collective voice of the community. As I reached my own lawn, lush and vibrant, a symbol of what had been reclaimed, I couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction. The past was behind us, and before us lay endless possibilities, no longer shadowed by scrutiny. Karen remained on her porch, a relic of a bygone era, her laughter a distant memory. Her gaze met mine, and for the first time, there was no malice, just a silent acknowledgement of what once was and what could never be again. In that moment, words were unnecessary. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that stretched lazily over the manicured grass. The street, now a testament to resilience, hummed with life. Karen, sidelined, watched as the world she tried to control moved on without her. And as I turned away, leaving her to her thoughts, I felt the weight of the past lift, carried away on the soft breeze of a new beginning.